School closures implemented response to COVID-19 pandemic may be most damaging disruption in history of American education. New York Times editorial board wrote a new editorial Saturday. The editorial offered a glimpse into significant learning losses resulting from nearly 50 million children being kept out classrooms because of virus and called on elected officials and education community to act quickly to ameliorate some damage. The newspaper came to these points after some mainstream media outlets also supported the same closures. Some in the media continued to argue that these were good decisions. COVID vaccine survey sees more than half of adults say thank you to vax. The editorial opened with a dire assessment of what the COVID-19 shutdown was doing to schoolchildren across America. The evidence is now clear and staggering. School closures, which forced 50 million children out classrooms at beginning of pandemic, may be most damaging disruption in history American education. Statement said. This has also set back students' progress in math reading by 2 decades and widened the achievement gap between poor-rich children, he added. To further complicate the issue, the board noted that learning losses will remain unaddressed when federal money runs out in 2024. Therefore, this generation of students will experience reduced lifetime earnings and pose a significant dent in the economy, the Times added. Citing economists, the editorial lamented that school administrators' politicians had not mobilized the country to confront this problem, and stated that tackling it would require a multidisciplinary approach, starting with getting kids on solid ground, replacing the federal aid designated to combat this problem becomes obsolete. He also detailed how the epidemic of absenteeism has increased the challenge of rehabilitating these students. The board wrote students who have become accustomed to missing school during the pandemic continue to do so after the resumption of in-person classes. Millions young people have joined ranks those who are chronically absent. That is, those who miss 10% or more the day's school year, and absenteeism will lead to gaps in learning. The article also mentioned that these children are also vulnerable to mental health problems that have worsened during the pandemic. Citing the CDC, the Times said more than 40 of high school students had persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. 22% had seriously considered suicide. 10 reported having attempted suicide. MSNBC host MEHDI HASAN called President Biden for said the pandemic is over. The editorial concluded. The learning loss crisis has more serious consequences than many elected officials have ever acknowledged. All Americans will need a collective sense of urgency to prevent its most devastating effects on the nation's children. The New York Times coverage in 2020 advocated for school closures despite the risks. Despite